Hi, welcome to the Recovery Daily Podcast. I'm your host, Rachel Abbasi. I'm a grateful recovering alcoholic and stroke survivor. And today I wanted to talk about step 5 of the Alcoholics Anonymous program. Step 5 calls for admitting to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. And this step is often met with a lot of fear and apprehension, but it's a pivotal moment in our journey towards lasting sobriety and genuine self-understanding. And I wanted to talk about this because on Sunday we read a really good story out of Spiritual Awakenings, which is an AA approved literature. I think I have it. Well, I have Spiritual Awakenings number 2. There's 2 of them, but this is one. This is part 2, or they made 2 books. So I have both of them. And there was a really good story called Building the Ark, or something to that effect. And it was about the author compared doing step 5 to how it works, which is a chapter in the big book. And so I wanted to talk about that because it really resonated with me, and talk a little bit about my experience approaching step 5. So how it works, the reading, which is, it's a chapter in the big book, and is also a piece of that chapter is typically read in lots of AA meetings. I think we read it once a week on Saturdays in my meeting, in my 7 a.m. meeting. But it starts out by saying, rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our path. And this, to me, means that there is an answer, there's a solution that will help those who are suffering if we earnestly follow the steps programs. The program steps. But the part of that comes with facing a lot of fear, and a lot of fear that we try to drink over and not face because it was going to be difficult. And so this program, people try an easier, softer way, and it just typically does not work. Like, we have to face these things. And I've heard people come into the program and say, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to do that. And they do not stay sober. So the fear of facing these dark things and these past mistakes, and not only what we have done to others, but what others have done to us, facing those can be very overwhelming. So preparing for step 5 involves a lot of cultivating a mindset of rigorous honesty and willingness to be able to face the truth about oneself, no matter how uncomfortable. So we typically do step 4, which I took far longer than I should have to do step 4. And then in my experience, I took step 4 and what I had written down, and I took it to my sponsor, and I sat with her and talked about it. So talked about my role in my relationships. And step 4 for me allowed me to switch the story that I was telling myself. All that stuff that I was blaming others for, step 4 allowed me to realize that I played a role in all of it. Of course, there are going to be some things that some folks have unfortunately experienced that there really doesn't seem to be anything that they could have done in order to, that they truly did not play a role, and they actually were the victim of some sort of assault or something like that. And I have not experienced that. And I'm not going to pretend to address that here, but I recognize that there are instances like that. So what I am addressing here are these situations that we get in with other people where we may have been emotionally driven to say things that we might regret, do things that we might regret. So step 5, and talking to my sponsor about it, was like opening the door to my heart and sharing it with another human being. And it is the beginning. It was for me the beginning of the end of my isolation. As much as I am a people person, there was, and I tend to still do this sometimes when I'm upset, when I'm depressed, when I have a lot of anxiety, I close up and I isolate myself. So for many like myself, sharing that stuff, I call it the stuff in my dark place, it's the beginning of an inner transition from talking. There's a lot that goes on from not talking at all to talking about my experiences. And then as that person responds to me, my experiences transition into this strength and hope that I didn't see in myself. So it's a step that challenges us to let go of old ideas, the belief that we can find an easier, softer way. And again, the only way to approach this is to understand that this is going to require total honesty and complete abandonment of self-deception. A lot of that time and that exercise of me isolating myself and closing up myself is because I began just lying to myself. I'm lying to myself that there's anything wrong with me. And I found that when I did the opposite, when I was willing to start talking and saying these things out loud, what I received in response from my sponsor was either, yeah, that happened to me too, or she shared a similar experience that, as I've heard in the program, it isn't my exact story, but it rhymed with mine. And it helped me to see that I'm not unique. And that's one of the best things that ever happened to me, was realizing that I'm not unique. I've shared about it before. I used to write poetry when I was younger, and one of the reasons why I did was because I thought that my feelings were unique. I thought that other people didn't think and feel the way that I did. And I see now that what was happening was that I was depressed. And that's why I felt like I was unique, because I hadn't found somebody else that was depressed like me. So, but I wasn't unique in the world. I just didn't have people around me that seemed like they were suffering from the same invisible illness that I was. So I'm approaching 8 years of sobriety this week, and I can see from where I sit now that step 5 was a turning point for me. There were lots of turning points, but step 5 was a big deal. It was where my burdens that I carried throughout my life began to transform into sources of strength for other people, the more that I shared them, and lessons for myself, and not exactly in that order. Sharing my vulnerabilities and flaws directly, not sugarcoating them or anything, but just coming out and being raw and letting them just, if I had to ugly cry, I would ugly cry. And I did a lot of ugly crying in the beginning of sobriety with my sponsor or in meetings. I cried a lot in meetings, and I was really embarrassed about it in the beginning until I saw that if I cry, nobody judged me. Nobody made me feel like I should be embarrassed about it. So, and then I saw other people crying. So I realized that sharing my vulnerabilities was not something to be embarrassed about, that everybody in the program has to do it. Everybody in the program gets to do it, because we're still around, and that's a miracle. So this step marked the end of this self-imposed isolation that I would continue to live in for so long, and it began a new chapter in my life where I could talk about my feelings and not be embarrassed about it, and know that I'm not unique. I no longer had to write what I was feeling down on a piece of paper and stick it in a folder and fear that anybody was going to find it, because that's what I used to do. I was very embarrassed of my poetry. I was very embarrassed about talking about how I felt, because I was just extremely emotional. So throughout the years, this power of sharing has evolved for me, clearly, because now I come here and I share whatever's on my mind and my experience, because I can see now, especially after my stroke, that what matters the most is that I can try to help somebody else not have to suffer as long as I did, thinking that I was so unique. The only way that I heard my story, or heard a story that rhymed with mine, was when I entered the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I thought, why don't I share my story outside of Alcoholics Anonymous, and maybe somebody can hear it before they go through getting the courage to walk into the rooms. So initially, step 5 was about me offloading these burdens, but today it serves as a real testament to the strength and hope that recovery can bring, that my sobriety program brings to me. And this transition that I've undergone highlights the importance of step 5 itself in personal recovery, and also in fostering a community of support and understanding. Without step 5, I would have never had the courage to do this podcast, for sure. And honestly, without without having suffered a stroke, without having lost some very close friends of mine due to the disease of alcoholism, I wouldn't have the courage. So everything has happened up until this point to lead me directly to where I am in front of this microphone. But it's important that I continue to practice. So step 5 is really more than a one-time action. I didn't know it at the time. I had no idea at the time when I was first going through the steps that these steps were going to become the principles that I could integrate into my daily life. I heard it. I heard people telling me that when I got into the sobriety program, but I didn't see it. It has taken this long for me to see it. And there's a reason why when you go into the sobriety rooms, they say keep coming back, because it takes time. It takes time to first unload your burdens, clean out your dark place, and then make room for filling that hole up with the positivity, hope, strength, and all that stuff that follows. But man, it takes time to do that. So I had to just keep showing up. Even when I didn't want to, I turned off my wanter and I just showed up to the meetings. So this step 5, I think was really the point where I started getting totally honest and transparent about what was really going on inside of me. And over time, as I consistently was honest and consistently got brave enough to share about things that are going on a daily basis, this principle of being totally honest and transparent started to integrate itself into all of my affairs. And by continuing to practice this principle, I'm able to defend my sobriety, and I'm able to continue to grow spiritually. And I'll tell you, I have a lot more integrity than I ever had in my whole life. So today I can see clearly the significance, despite the challenges of step 5. And my path to recovery was paved with honesty and courage. And it continues to be that way. Again, folks keep saying, keep coming back. I hear it at the end of every meeting, and trust in the process. And it makes me think of going to my vestibular therapist. She's been giving me activities to do, to exercise my eyes and I guess train my brain a little bit to get comfortable and not be so stressed out about moving my head in different ways and seeing motion and stuff. And what I've realized is just recently, this past week, that some of these exercises she was giving me were for different reasons than I thought they were. I thought that when she had me look at something and move my head back and forth like that, I thought it was testing my balance, but I think what it's actually doing is stretching I don't know if it's muscles, but around my eyes. So she says, let's warm up your eyes. That's how we start off every appointment. And I've talked to her about like straining my eyes. Like I feel like I'm straining my eyes a lot. And she said that has a lot to do with you're starting to move your eyes, and you have been accommodating for this discomfort and pain in your head for so long that your muscles have not stretched. So I don't look very far in a direction in order to keep my eye muscles loose. I don't know what the right terminology is, but my point is that she told me when I first started going to her a month ago, I just want to ask you to trust in the process and keep showing up. It's the same thing. Everything she has told me is pretty much practice your program. I have to keep coming back and trust in the process. I may not understand why I'm doing certain things, but more will be revealed. There was no way I could have seen what step 5 or any of these steps were doing for me in the big picture, in the long run, as I'm able to see it now. And I'm sure that more will be revealed throughout my life. So step 5 is absolutely a testament to the program's foundation, to the AA program's foundation, that healing could only begin when I was brave enough to expose my deepest, darkest truths to another sick and suffering alcoholic just like me. And that is something that when people come to me and they talk about things like something that they're suffering with, whether it is the loss of a loved one, somebody who is suffering, from vestibular discomfort, stroke survivor, any of these things, I feel like healing really begins when we're able to start talking about what's hidden in there that we don't typically like to talk about. But not just talk about it with anybody, talk about it with somebody else who's sick and suffering with a similar issue that you're suffering from. That's what helps me, and that's why I'm so adamant about being a part of all of these support groups, because it's helping me with all of my issues. But it takes a lot of time. Keep showing up. So thank you for listening today to the Recovery Daily podcast. I will talk to you tomorrow.